She's here, but not quite there yet. And then we were, I spoke with Beth Little tonight. She will not be able to join us. She had a conflict, and so she was apologetic, but told her not to be because she's very busy. And so tonight also, Chris, we've given our consultants a night off since our agenda is so limited. So Joe or Tom from Burgess or Chris from, I keep wanting to call him Mazer. I guess we have to call it the other name, whatever it is. I forget what it is.
Colliers.
Well, it's still Mazer, but just Collier Mazer. I mean, it's somebody's got a, there was a sub of them, right?
Well, it's a competitor.
It's like a JV.
It's it's a competitor to Paul's team. Did you say that? Did you say it was a JV?
There's two. It's a joint venture.
Oh, I thought you meant like JV as in junior varsity.
No.
That's the way we all interpret it.
I'm not like that.
Man, that was a put down.
Call to order?
Yeah, that's
I think so.
All right.
Wait, was that
Punching
Amanda
bag.
speaking in the background?
Pretty
All
much.
All right. So, all right, we'll do a call to order. I'll call the meeting to order here at 7:32 p.m. And I'll read the adequate notice statement. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by the board in preparation of the 2021 annual meeting notice, which sets forth the date, time, and place of this meeting, and by properly posting such notice and forwarding the notice to those designated newspapers and persons requesting meeting notices. Moreover, in order to comply with the national and state declarations of emergency related to the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the municipal land use law, the Open Public Meetings Act, and the emergency remote meeting protocols for local public bodies as set forth in NJAC 5939-1 et seq, whatever that means. You'll have to tell me. This meeting is being held virtually on a web-based platform with remote public access. So, all right, we got that done. That's good stuff. And we'll go to our Pledge of Allegiance. Our flag is behind me, as you can see there, flying proudly. And we'll stand up here. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which
for
it
which it
stands,
stands, one nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible, with
with
liberty
liberty
and
and justice for all.
All right, very good. Okay. All right, Mr. Secretary, could you do a roll call?
Certainly. Chairman Anderson,
Present.
Vice Chairman Brinkerhoff,
Present.
Ms. Paulson Alvarez. I think she's here on mute right now. We'll ask her to unmute. All right, we'll come back to her. Mr. Dory.
Present.
Councilmember Little is excused. Ms. McNeil.
Here.
Mr. Perrella.
Here.
Mr. Zucker.
Here.
Mr. Fiore.
Here.
Mr. Formicelli.
Here.
Mr. Ashman is excused. Mr. Warner.
Here.
All right, and we have a quorum. We can proceed. And
Very good.
we'll wait for Jennifer, or we can proceed and see when she joins.
All right, great. Thanks, Chris. Thanks very much. Well, looking at our agenda tonight, we first thing we have on the agenda was the minutes from our meeting of July 28th. And just wonder if anybody has any comments, additions, deletions to those minutes.
Bill, I have one comment.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
In the last paragraph regarding 74 Templar, I'd ask you to take a look at the last sentence. I think it's a little bit garbled. And Chris, if you can listen for this, it says a motion for approval was made by Mr. Fiore. It goes on. And it says subject to board engineer and the city engineer. It needs a word there, approval, subject to the board and city engineer, what? Approval, consent, something like that. And then it should say for FOR, a multi-level wall or a multi-level 8.5 foot wall for an approximate stretch of 40 feet, blah, blah, blah. I think that's a little bit clearer if everyone else is okay with that.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
Got it noted. Thanks.
Thank you. That's all.
Okay, anyone else? Chris, just one thing at the bottom of page 2, the very last sentence there, at the bottom of the page, it says, Yassine explained that
Oh.
if the right of way, just one
Way.
little letter there, was improved, that, and so that's all we need to do is just change that.
Yeah, got it. Thanks.
And then that was the only comment. Very, very well done.
Right.
Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from July 28th?
Motion to approve.
And a second?
Second.
And
That was as amended. And all in favor?
Aye.
aye,
Aye.
aye,
Any
Aye.
opposed? Seeing none.
great, thank you.
I abstain. I wasn't there.
Yes.
Okay, that's right, yeah, okay.
It doesn't have these.
So then we have a public hearing tonight that Mr. Warner will address, give us a little background on this one and take that away there, Steve.
Oh, certainly. And this is mainly for the benefit of the members of the public who are attending for this meeting, because the public hearing on the Beechwood at Summit LLC 43 Woodland Avenue, Block 1905, Lot 2, application number PB 19250, by request of the applicant, is being carried again, currently to November 22nd, I'm sorry, not our next meeting, November 22nd, correct, Chris?
That's correct.
Okay, 2021 at 7:30 PM. That's going to be without further notice, if indeed it remains a remote meeting at that point. If we move to in-person meeting by that point, then that applicant will be required to renotice, because there will be a change in the venue, the location of the meeting, obviously from remote to in-person. So you may or may not be getting a further notice about the November 22nd date, depending upon whether we stay virtual to that point or go in person. But regardless, the matter is carried to November 22nd, 2021 at 7:30 PM. I hope that's clear.
Steve, can I ask a question?
There, well, I mean, with the chair's permission, of course.
Of course, yeah, sure.
Is there a limitation on how many times this can be moved?
Excellent question. The municipal land use law does not provide a number of times one can adjourn without further notice before it can be adjourned with notice, or has to be with notice. It's essentially discretionary. The only required notice is the first one. I will say, though, that generally I suggest when it reaches a quote unquote certain number, and then the board should consider whether or not to renotice. I don't require renotice. I don't believe it's there yet, number one. But number two, also, if there's any change in the application, or as I mentioned, the venue, which may or may not change if we're back in person by then or not, then certainly it should be a renotice. I will also say that if after an extraordinary quote unquote amount of time, an applicant is carrying a matter and not proceeding to prosecute the matter, then the board would have discretion to dismiss without prejudice. But frankly, under those circumstances, candidly, usually what happens is the applicant will agree to withdraw without prejudice at that point. So all that said by way of TMI, perhaps education, hopefully, teachable moment. The short answer is there's not a set number.
Steve, Bill, can I ask him a follow-up question?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
So the without notice, then, does that mean that the burden is on the public to go to the city's website and to find out whether it's going to be on the agenda? Like, how does the people of the public that are interested in that application then know that it's going to be November or carried? Like, how does somebody in the public know whether it's carried and what date it's carried to?
MLUL simply requires us to announce it at each meeting that we're carrying it from, if it's being carried without notice.
Okay, so they have,
We've done it already. That
Right.
said, for the benefit of the public and the comfort of the board, as you know, we do have a wonderful website and what have you. So
Right.
there are additional resources available for the public to track it. but we've already literally done all that is legally required to do by announcing it.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Good questions. All right, so our next item on the agenda is our resolution with Mountain View Development, 74 Templar Way. And Steve did a really nice job. Well, I should say Amanda did a really nice job putting this resolution together.
I do review and even revise her work, believe it or not, but
We don't believe it.
oh, thank you. But I'm not going to ask for a vote on that. Thank you.
So anyone have any questions, comments, or thoughts, ideas with regard to the resolution that was put together?
No.
It's very, very thorough, as usual, Steve. It's very, very clear, very thorough.
Thank you. If I may say so, the board, as always, did a phenomenal job, in my opinion. This was a somewhat unique circumstance, and the
Yeah.
board, I think, handled it expertly. So drafting the resolution for Amanda and I was the easy part.
Well, thanks. It was certainly a head scratcher there at the beginning, for sure. All right, so just a voice vote. Chris, on this one, I need a motion to approve in a second. But if we can have someone make a motion to, assuming there's no more comments with regard to the resolution. Can I have a motion to approve
So moved.
and a second? Thanks, Jay.
Second.
Or that might have been Ellen, I'm not sure. Either one, maybe.
Sure. I second it.
Okay, all right, thanks, Ellen. And so we'll take a vote there. Chris, do you need a voice vote or a
Roll call, please.
roll call vote? Sure.
Chairman Anderson,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Brinkerhoff,
Yes.
Ms. McNeil,
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
Mr. Perrella,
Yes.
Mr. Fiore,
Yes.
and Mr. Formicelli.
Yes.
And those were all our eligible voting members for that.
Okay, very good. Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Well, now we're getting to the meat of the agenda here. That what you've all been waiting for tonight is to review and comment the adoption of the updated bylaws. So I think now that I'm sure we've all read them very carefully and compared them to the older bylaws, I thought it might be helpful for Steve to give us a rough overview of the purpose of the bylaws and why he's made the changes and how he came to the conclusion that 25-year-old bylaws needed to be changed.
And they're not just because they have long since passed their 25th birthday, although that might be a good reason. And as the chairman noted in a conversation I had with the chair very astutely, one need only look at the font or type writing of the existing bylaws to see that they might be a little on the older side.
Yeah.
But Section 8 of the municipal land use law requires that we have rules, and we did have rules, and frankly, they weren't bad rules. But candidly, as time goes by, some have become, in my opinion, not entirely accurate by virtue of changes in the municipal land use law and other rules and regulations and statutes. Two, it's important to have comprehensive board rules. In my experience, they can benefit the public, applicants, objectors, and candidly benefit the board where questions arise and if there are appeals. And as I mentioned, some of the items have been rendered incorrect over time. And not only more comprehensive, I think, is our model, if you will, that we utilize as a template and customize and update as we did here for the board. But also, candidly, I think the table of contents and the headings and all kind of help you move through them better than if you're just kind of hunting and pecking and fishing for different things in the rules. So those were the general guiding principles I utilized to make a suggestion that we utilize our the benefit of our experience and work over time to maybe update our 25 and a half, 25 and 3/4 year old bylaws so that they are hopefully picture perfect. I note one, they're not picture perfect yet, one typo, Chris, on page 10, 2:2-2, voting margin and effect. We have a quorum written properly, the number 5 as 5 members, but just before it, we had the word 4 instead of 5. If you could just make a note, I'll get it to you if you need it, just to clean up that one. I didn't see any other errors when I proofread it this afternoon. But most of these, I will tell the board, are strictly pursuant to the municipal land use law, not exactly discretionary for modification. Some of them are, fill in the blank, i.e. the address, the nights we meet, things like that. Some of them are specific to the local government ethics law and what have you. Some there is some discretion. And certainly the board can decide that if the board wants to decide not to be so comprehensive, the MLUL doesn't require you to have comprehensive and great rules. It just requires you to have rules. I'd like you to have comprehensive ones and ones that I think are pretty darn good. So with that, Mr. Chairman, unless you or the board have any specific questions or however you want to handle it, I think candidly, while it may not be critically urgent, I think the sooner the better we have these bylaws adopted. The sooner the better, in my opinion.
You're muted, Bill.
Bill, I think you're still
Bill,
muted. Oh, there you go.
I am muted. That's right. Sorry. My home, my 4-legged fire and or alarm, I guess not fire alarm, but our emergency alarm went off, and I wanted to
Thank you.
quiet my dog down here a little bit, so I put everybody on mute. She's doing fine now, so she's sitting quietly over here by my desk, so all is well. Sorry about that. So Jay, you had your hand up. Any comments, questions?
No,
Just delete.
No, I was going to say you're muted, but frankly, I thought these were great. I thought it was terrific. I had one typo. There's references in several places to Thursdays meetings. It should be Monday, of course. Just that's the only
Thank you.
I could. I thought these were a big improvement, and I'm perfectly fine with it.
Thank you.
Well, Thursday is the new Monday. I do agree with Jay.
As long as it's not Friday or Saturday.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just in looking at them in general, Steve, as you stated, we have a table of contents, so you can get a sense just by reading that what's generally in the rules. So that I think is very helpful rather than having to sort of go page by page. You can go looking for things that are important. And every time I read something like this, I'll learn something, or sometimes I learn something I've already read and I forgot about. So there's some interesting things in here. One of the things that I think we have a little problem with as a board, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but if you go to 1.3.7, and it's a function of our past caseload, for lack of a better way of saying it. But it's interesting. So I wanted to ask you a little bit, Steve, about time limitations. The paragraph says the board shall be under no obligation to consider new matters after 10:30 p.m. So we're just getting rolling at that point. But anyway, we'll take no new testimony beyond 11 p.m. This rule may be waived by an affirmative vote of a majority of the board members then present. So I've heard from other people that I know that are on boards that some of these boards are very strict about this rule. We have been less so just because of some of the cases we had so many people, members of the public that wanted to comment. We've kind of, added an hour to each one of these two, end times. So what are your thoughts on this and how it's applied elsewhere in the state, and what's your experience with it?
But mine personally,
Please.
yeah, all the boards I represent, as far as I know, the vast majority, if not all of the boards out there in the 565 municipalities in the state of New Jersey, have this either in writing or in their standard operating procedures, even if they're not in writing. Interestingly, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 50% adhere to it in a more strict way, i.e. when 10:30 rolls up or 11 o'clock rolls up, the chair will say, you got to keep track of, literally the time. Does the board want to continue with this particular matter, this particular witness? Do I have a motion, a second, and a voice vote from a majority of the board to go from 11 o'clock to 11:15 or 11:30, etc.? I have some boards, candidly, who have, well, another 15 vote, another 15 vote, and then, and do it in 15-minute increments. It's good if you could do it that way, I guess, because that way it's clear on the record, how much longer you're going, that you're going beyond the usual, how much longer, and that you got your majority of your board authorizing you to do so. But to be candid, that's not done that way, that formally 100% of the time by all the boards.
So I read somewhere where relative to boards and time limits, that people believe the decision-making capability of people declines after a certain time of day or night. And so I don't know if that has anything to do with based on any, studies or otherwise, or just somebody's intuition, but I guess that's.
If nothing else, you're volunteers. You don't need me to remind you.
Yeah. All right, I just thought I would hear that
Mr.
out.
Chairman.
Yes, John, yeah. Mhm.
Hi, if I just I just want to catch one typo in the bylaws, if I may.
Sure.
Under section 2:1-3, the order of events, subsection G, it talks about a board member introducing evidence that they gathered by visiting the premises.
Yeah.
And it makes reference to the procedure for that, which it says is Rule 2:2-8. In fact, that should be referenced to Rule 2:1-8.
Oh,
You'll find it's a slightly different, just a small typo, but if we're going to guide people to where the rules are.
sure.
Thank you.
That's good.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Yeah, you are correct. Thank you. Thank you.
I thought that was an interesting paragraph. I don't want to bring this discussion out too far, but I thought there was an
So did
interesting
I.
paragraph about the idea of visiting the site and the knowledge that we all have about our town. We all have knowledge that's, can be brought to bear on these cases. Some, even a fair amount of detailed knowledge about it.
That frankly is a key part of the local land use process and the reason why boards are the way they are and recognized by the courts. And that's why all board decisions have a presumption of validity and helps my job tremendously when I'm defending an appeal of any board's decision. If anyone is foolish enough to appeal the decision of any one of my wise boards, including this one, that presumption is tremendous. And that is because the courts recognize there's a sentence in every decision. I should memorize it by now, but ordinary citizens of the municipality, the residents are in the best position to analyze, what is appropriate for the neighborhood, what isn't, what have you. So you understand the concept, you know it. You didn't need me to tell you. That's why it's a board of residents, as opposed to one land use expert who decides all land use applications.
Well, it's also interesting to see that you can have witnesses on the board side or witnesses on the applicant side, and the board, if it so chooses, can make its own decision regardless of what was presented, which is interesting.
Absolutely, yeah, and it is important in that, as mentioned in that rule, that particularly if you glean some knowledge from viewing the property that might be unique, you want to put it on the record as a board member, either in questioning or a statement, what have you. It doesn't have to be a formal proclamation of what you saw and what you know. But the reason to put it on the record is so that everybody, applicants, objectors, public members, have an opportunity to weigh in. You may have seen something you thought was problematic. I had a case once where somebody said, there's trucks that are such and such in the parking lot there. And the applicant said, thank you for mentioning that. There was actually an emergency that day when you came. Those were, and there was some sort of emergency reason why they had those trucks there. It was an aberration. They're never there, literally, but for that one day. And it just happened to be a coincidence that a board member happened to come on that moment to see all those trucks there. So it gives everybody an opportunity in the due process to be aware of what you're considering and making your decision, and to be able to address it, so that you might find out what you were thinking wasn't exactly the usual case.
So back in our June meeting, we said that we would, at our September meeting, since we skipped a meeting there, I think it was back in June, we said that we would bring these bylaws forward and review them and talk about them. Then we sent them out 10 days ago. Do people feel like they've had enough time to go ahead and adopt or approve the new rules and regulations, or do people want a little more time with these?
I'm good.
Everybody
Okay.
good? Okay.
Yep.
Good.
I think we're good.
Great, thanks. So can I have a motion to approve and to adopt the new bylaws for our board?
So moved.
All right, and a second?
Second,
Right. Thanks. Okay, great. And I guess at this case, we do need a full roll call vote here.
Okay, Chairman Anderson,
Yes.
Ms. Boston Alvarez, who joined the board now,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Brinkroff,
Yes.
Mr. Dory,
Yes.
Ms. McNeil,
Yes.
Mr. Perrella,
yes.
Mr. Zucker,
Yes.
Mr. Fiore,
We're on mute.
Yes, sorry.
and Mr. Formicelli.
Yes.
Now, truth be told, Jennifer texted me a few minutes after we started and said she was having technical difficulties and wasn't able to get in. So I'm glad you finally got here, Jennifer. Thanks. Good to see you.
Thank you.
there's
Never
two-
happened before, but it's
That's
always a first. So.
They're gremlins. They're little gremlins in the computer somewhere. So there's two items that I'd like to talk about just really briefly, not to take this meeting too much longer than it needs to be. But one is with regard to historic preservation. Our team of Beth and Jennifer and Andy. We have this subcommittee, and jump in here when I finish you, the members of the subcommittee. But subcommittee had suggested that we hire Barton and Associates. Is that right? Barton, I think is Barton.
Barton Ross.
Yeah, Barton is his first name. I'm sorry. So we advanced that proposal up through Aaron Schrager, back and forth a few emails. He went over and reviewed it with Michael Rogers, and Beth Little has reviewed it and talked with staff about it as well. So we have the approval to go forward with the consultant, but not until we really have a fiscal or a new budget for a coming year, which would be sometime in November. So I'm hoping that the November 22nd meeting that we can have Barton Ross there to present to us, talk to us a little bit about what's going on at the state, and talk a little bit about a proposed ordinance. We also will need to visit with city staff, and we'll need obviously to go through common council at some point in time as well. So at least we will start the ball rolling, albeit a little later than we hope, but I think in good hands. So Andy or Jennifer, anybody, Beth is not here tonight, but anybody want to add to that sort of overview of HP? Sure.
I can add if Andy doesn't want to. Andy will add after, I'm sure. Barton Ross is the authority on historic preservation in municipalities in the state. And he actually wrote the draft that we had edited, and he's going to look at it once he's retained. And we're hoping to, if he edits it, great. If he leaves it alone, that's great too. But we'll give you that draft after he looks at it before the meeting when he comes. So you can have good questions for him and maybe I'll give you some background too on general historic preservation policies and how it's done in the state of New Jersey, just so that we can have a good conversation and utilize him to the best of our ability. So that
And he
he'll
was
come and
involved,
hear-
if I'm not mistaken, involved in the initial draft of the one 8 or 10 years ago or 12 years ago or whenever it was done. And he was on the City of Summit Historic Preservation Commission. Is that right?
Yes.
So he knows, he knows the city well, and he's had some history, which I think is going to be
Mhm.
valuable for us.
And the State Historic Preservation Office, who knows all the municipalities in New Jersey, said that the Milburn ordinance is the best. And the Milburn ordinance is based on the draft he made for Summit.
Okay. All right. And
Bill, two things
yeah,
I add.
yeah.
Sure, two things. One, I think it's also important to recognize that Steve was also involved in the subcommittee. And so Jennifer and Beth and I went through the draft in full several
Okay.
times with him. So we had legal advice. So we weren't just doing this blindly and taking a legal document and changing it ourselves. And I think the biggest thing to take away from this is that I think we came up with an ordinance that is fair for both the town, that recognizes that we want to preserve the historical part of our town, but at the same time is not overbearing and does not place undue restrictions on people in terms of what they can and cannot do with their properties. But at the same time, people that own houses in historic areas or that are historic houses need to recognize that those houses are a part of the history of our city and they cannot just do whatever they want to them. And I think that's what we tried to do without being heavy-handed in one way or the other.
Thanks, Andy. That was helpful. And just in general, with regard to demolition, what were your thoughts there? I'm getting into more weeds probably than I should, but I knew that was kind of an issue that a number of us have thought about, you know, in terms of how to handle that. It's a difficult issue for sure.
Well, I think what we tried to preserve was the front and the look, and Jennifer can comment on this as well. I think we're trying to preserve the front and the look and the feel, but not preventing somebody who wants to put in addition or take out a back portion of the house. But at the same time, if the front of the house has rotting wood, not replacing it with, you know, vinyl siding, but trying to replace it with a more modern product that has the look and the feel of the historic house that it is, so that it can last them for the next 20 or 30 years, because they're going to be making a significant investment in their house and not saying to them, well, you have to go find, you know, a redwood tree in the middle of the forest because you had redwood on your house.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the overbearingness where some towns, quite frankly, do that. They say, hey, you can't touch your house and it's got to rot. And if you have termites, tough luck, go deal with it and get an organic spray on it. I mean, we don't want to do that, but at the same time, I don't think we want to, you know, over the last several years, we've seen too many houses that are historic houses and disappear. And if we don't stop it, we won't have a history other than what people have up on pictures.
I mean, it was an important part of the master plan, you know, people who said they moved to Summit, you know, if you remember all the meetings we had, you know, with the citizens, it was important. The, you know, scale and texture and historic nature was important to the people that moved here. And as I've said eloquently a number of times, what I came away from was we moved here because we liked it, and you planning people don't screw it up. That's kind of the sum and substance of what I learned from those meetings. So anyway, so I appreciate the update. Anything else you'd like to add to? Oh, hi, Rich. Yeah.
Just a question. So you guys are speaking specifics, which I don't disagree with, but what then is the role of the consultant coming in after the fact? So what is their role going to be?
Well, as I look at it, Barton is going to tell us, you know, give us an overview of what has been drafted by our subcommittee and look at it, but he's also going to sort of give us some perspective of what goes on in the state between, if you have a continuum of zero interference on the part of the city, let anything happen together, and 10 being, you can't, as Andy said, you can't do anything if you have termites. Where does our ordinance that's being proposed fit in that, continuum? And then where are maybe towns that are similar or a lot like ours? What sort of things do they have in place that we might just learn from and benchmark against? So
So
that's
we've
kind of what I'm
created-
thinking about, because I've not been advanced as far advanced as the subcommittee has.
Okay, so we've essentially created an outline that he's then gonna provide structure to or perspective.
No, Rich.
We've
he-
written a
he-
draft. We took his original draft, which was the best in the state. We actually made it a little less stringent by making, the big difference, honestly, is, and what that means by the best in the state is legally defensible, and it's in compliance with the MLUL. So it's a good document to start. But the main change that we made was that it's only about the exterior, which is the same, but we made it only visible from the public right of way. So
But where does,
rather than the whole building all the way around. I'll get to your answer, Rich, just a second. So we wrote the whole ordinance, we edited it. We edited the whole ordinance. It was already written. And we're gonna have Barton look at it, double check it, make any edits he thinks are required. And then we're gonna give it to you guys. And then you're gonna read it and see what you think. And then we're gonna have Barton come in because he's the expert in the field to answer your questions. So he's really here to help you understand how it's done in New Jersey, what's the norms, like Bill said, from A to Z, there are gonna be ordinances that are tougher and there are gonna be ordinances that are less tough, and just help you to understand what are the norms in New Jersey and what's the scale in New Jersey and what this means. So it's really an educational thing. And I think that it also will help with when it goes to city council to give them some background, give them some understanding, and just knowing that we're going to have the best ordinance we can have.
Does that answer the question, Rich?
it does. I mean, it's what I thought. And so it's essentially been written. There's a structure there and you're going to have him, tighten it up, revise it, explain. All right. Okay.
Well, yeah, and Rich, when we reviewed it, we also tried to make things a little bit clearer and obviously with Steve's help, so there were certain things that we thought were a little vague or ambiguous with regard to notices that people had and rights that people had to appeal and object. And we went over the number of days and how that corresponded. We spoke to Krista, and there were certain things that we wanted to make clearer so that, again, it wasn't overbearing on people, so that people had a very clear and concise way to object, understand they couldn't object, and understand clearly what their responsibilities were and what we as a town told them they needed to comply with, but yet not make it that they didn't have there's an out in this for people to object, to put their house on the market, to do this. There's ways that, that this is not just, hey, you do what we tell you at the front of your house. You don't like it, too bad, go jump in a lake. And so for a very small investment, we thought, because none of us are experts in historic preservation, we thought it would be a good idea that Barton came in and explained it to everybody and looked at what we revised and said, well, you know what, maybe you thought that was good, but it's not good. And I think you need to change it to this. And this is why I'm telling you. And that's why, and also for the Common Council, because part of what he's going to do is speak to us and to speak to the Common Council. So he's on a small retainer to speak to both committees to help everybody move this forward. Because I'm assuming that everybody thinks this is an important part of our town.
Well, it was part of the master plan, it was one of those things we had to get to in addition to that small document that we worked on last year. Once we completed that effort, this was the next step sort of in the list of to-dos, so to speak, under the master plan re-exam. So that's kind of where we are on that. All right, so we'll look forward to that on the 22nd of November. The last item on my agenda, which is not in the printed agenda, is sort of just getting people's thoughts and ideas about going back in person versus Zoom. Are people dying to get back in, on the October 25th meeting or whatever it is, or they want to wait till January or never want to go back? Or just curious as to what people's thoughts are with regard to that. And Chris, maybe you can give us a little bit of background in terms of what you're seeing with the zoning board at this point.
Yeah, so like the council and the governing body, the zoning board is now fully in person. So pretty much exactly how they run the meeting. We set up the chairs with hometown TV out in the police foyer should somebody want to watch before they come in, and all the chairs are socially distanced, etc. But as of now, yeah, the zoning board's fully in person and no indication that going back to remote at this time. So it's really up to the planning board how they want to proceed, but that's kind of just where the board's at.
Then maybe Steve, you have any sort of bigger picture, broader comments? I know you have thoughts, about, the fact that we're a body that, has a quasi judiciary form, I guess, like the zoning board in some extent, but maybe different from the common council in terms of how we have to proceed and take testimony and other kinds of things.
Well, just a couple of things. One, as you just said, the land use boards as quasi judicial bodies have more difficulty, in my opinion, than other public bodies, including the governing body, because we have what are effectively trials, and the other bodies do not have those quasi judicial hearings. So it is a little harder to facilitate due process and the right of confrontation, unless either you're in person, which is how it was set up so many centuries ago or frankly, in my opinion, completely virtually, because we've gotten fairly good at it. But I think the hardest way for us to do it, frankly, unless you have tremendous technology, and everybody would have to have tremendous technology, is the hybrid. Candidly, when I was involved in putting together the rules on how we would do this virtually statewide, how long ago was it? March of whatever it was. This is COVID-19. We're going to be in 2022 soon, aren't we? I was one of the first people to say one day this is going to end. I thought it was going to be sooner. I didn't know. I said, but I suspect we're not just going to go back in person, all of us together, 565 municipalities on one day, boom, like that. And I thought there would be a transition period. And I thought, frankly, hybrid would be, although I didn't use that term at the time, would be the answer. Once we got close to being able to go in person, I realized that, I think hybrid technologically is the toughest way to do it. I guess what I'm saying is that out of the three choices, I think the most realistic choices are virtual or in person in order to effectuate what it is we're obligated to do under the law. Procedurally, and each body, while I think there's something to be said for uniformity and consistency, we are separate, so we're ready to go in person when a majority of you say we're ready to go in person, at least for now, because legally you can do it still either virtually or in person right now. I promise I'll spare you the whole analysis on the executive orders for that. If and when we're ready to go back, or I should say when we're ready to go back in person, my advice is we have at least a 1 month lag, so to speak, 1 month time frame for two reasons. One, to give all the applicants an opportunity who have been noticing for virtual meetings to be able to now renotice for an in-person meeting, because they're going to have to renotice. So you don't want it to jump up on them, a few days before, the hearing, that you're going to first go back in person. Secondly, Chris has to pop something in the newspaper, because we have an annual schedule. You may recall we've done this before. When we went virtual, we had to have Chris put in the newspapers the fact that our annual schedule has changed and meetings for a period of time are going to be virtual, not in person. So those are my 2 points. One, I think we should not consider hybrid as a practical reality. And when you're ready to go in person, frankly, I'm ready to go in person. And the second thing is procedurally, when you're ready to go in person, don't do it until a month out. Give a heads up to the applicants and the public so they know, and to Chris so he can do his thing.
I've spoken to a few board members, and I meant to get to every one of us tonight before this conversation, but I just wasn't able to. But some of the board members I've spoken to are there's sort of pros and cons. If you put them in a bucket, the pros are, I think some people feel that the citizens have a better opportunity to participate because they can do it more or less from their living room, so to speak, or their offices in their homes. And another thought one of the board members I spoke to had was, that they liked the fact that they could see the exhibits better and more clearly, so that when the consultant, architect or engineer, whoever was going through certain exhibits, all of the board members and everybody was focused on the same exhibit. So one could follow exactly what they were saying, and you weren't leaping through a bunch of big plans on your desk or on the dais there, and banging your microphones and losing the concentration there. So there was sort of another thought, and especially given the length of time that some of these meetings went, it was more convenient for citizens to come in, virtually. So I think the negatives of that I heard was, they missed the interaction between the board members and some of the visual clues that you get in the interaction, not just from the board members, but interaction among the applicant and their consultants, and the sort of visual body language clues that we sometimes read and don't even know we're really reading about them. Probably not mentioned and entered as testimony, Steve, but still you learn a lot sometimes that way. So that was sort of kind of the feedback that I got. And some people felt, well, all right, as Steve's saying, if we're going to go back in person, it's probably looking at like a November meeting. And then one suggestion was, well, why don't we let this variant thing play its way out through the fall and consider going back in January. So that was the sum and substance of my homework in talking to several of the board members. And I don't want to put people on the spot if they don't feel like saying this sort of in a public forum. I can continue to make phone calls and we can continue to study this. But if anyone has any thoughts and ideas they'd like to share, we'd love to hear them. It's really a board decision, really, ultimately. And I don't want to lose, I don't know that we would lose any board members. It's possible, depending upon personal situations at home and so on and so forth. If you have mothers, sisters, brothers, cousins, aunts that are not vaccinated, and you have to deal with them in some form or another. So I know it could be an important personal decision as well, potentially. So anyone have any, like to offer any thoughts?
Mr. Fiore has some thoughts.
Rich.
Sure.
Rich, you're on mute.
Oh,
Well, I have a question for Steve, if that's okay.
sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
So I don't know if it would, I'm actually fine going back in person and I'm okay if people don't have to show a vaccination card, but if it would give people more comfort to have folks that attend, be it the public and us, show proof of vaccination, is that something that is an option for us to do?
The candidly not certain. Frankly, I would want the governing body and the administration to weigh in on that, even though we are an independent board of adjustment. Because, and I'd have to double check. I don't have that happening anywhere else, put it that way. It would be something that would be, I would have to research to make sure, A, I'm comfortable legally we can do it, and B, I wouldn't want to be the one who was the only person saying we can legally do it. I would want to make sure there was a comfort level, at the municipal end, not just at the Board of Adjustment end, that legally we could do it.
People more more sense of, the organizations are starting to do it, like Vail Resorts now. For any indoor dining, you have to show proof of vaccination, but
New York City as well.
yeah.
If you're
Yeah.
dining indoors, you have to show proof of
So,
vaccination.
yeah, my building requires in public areas that you have to wear masks. So I guess my question, sort of piggybacking off of Rich's about the vaccination, would we require unvaccinated people who want to attend that they have to wear masks? And is it going to be some of these situations that we've seen where, at these Board of Education meetings where there's protesters and people who are anti-masker, anti-vaxxers? Are they going to be, screaming in our faces? Because I don't want to go back to that. I'm fine going back in person, but I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to put myself in that position.
With the chair's permission, if I could ask Chris, because Chris, I think, has the benefit not only of how things have been working with the Board of Adjustment, and I think they have had a couple of meetings already, but also could certainly better than I speak to, because I have no idea what exactly is going on vis-a-vis spacing, masks required or discretionary, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So with the chair's
So-
permission, maybe Chris could weigh in.
Bill,
Yeah, Chris, yeah, please.
you
go
good?
ahead.
Okay. I didn't hear the permission, so I waited.
Oh, no, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so the zoning board, both the council and the zoning board, there's a sign right on the council chambers that masks are required. We supply them right when you walk in, should anybody need one. There's sanitizer ready. The only time really anyone's removing the mask is should they be speaking into a microphone. If they feel like they need to project more, the microphone will pick it up if you leave the mask on, but they do allow for that. We also changed the windscreens on the microphones to ensure, they're sanitary for the next person that would use it at the following meeting. So the mask is required based off of the signage and everything else at this point.
But there's
What
no
about
requirement
spacing?
for showing your-
The dais is set up in the same fashion as usual. There's no spacing for that. That's changed from when we were first there.
Yeah,
What
What
Paul,
about spacing
Yeah,
for chairs
I was
for
gonna
the
say-
public?
Well, what about, to put it a different way, what if we have a hearing like we did for Primrose, which might have had several hundred people versus one like tonight where there are, I think, 2 attendees on the attendee list.
Yeah,
So there's a
we
big
haven't
difference
been-
in terms of how that might work.
That's
When
exactly,
when you have that many people, you honestly need to start considering changing the venue in the first place to something that can accommodate more people. We do set up chairs outside with the TV on the hometown television channel for people that may want to watch it from outside and then come in when it's time for them to say something. But when you have a meeting like that, we would be exploring options, basically to find an auditorium or something where we could have that many people there.
Yeah, that would be just like in the old days when you had too many people and the fireman's capacity was, for the room was too, and you had to go to the high school gym or whatever, but even pre-pandemic. But Chris, what we're not spacing I know we're not spacing on the dais. We're not spacing in the room for members of the public either.
I haven't had a meeting with too many people in it, but my understanding, and I don't want to step on anyone's toes, but I don't believe there's any requirement at this point with social distancing in the chambers itself.
And the chairs are where they used to be. Nobody's
Yeah,
moving
right.
chairs.
Everything is set up exactly how it is. Like I said, we haven't had a meeting at this point where we've had, a Primrose or anything like that, where there's literally that many people. So everybody does follow social distancing when, there's only 10 people in the room.
so Steve, I have a question to your hybrid analysis. If we have a meeting like today and virtually nothing, but then we know we're gonna, on the agenda, we see another Primrose coming, are we then allowed to switch back and say we need to do this virtually because we're going to have 150? I mean, we had 100 members of the public for several meetings, and we had several special meetings. So are we allowed, is the chair permitted to say, hey, we're not going to be able to do this unless we get the high school auditorium? And even then, I don't know that we're going to be able to space everybody out. Can we go back for some?
First of all, if you don't have the room in the building, you can bring it to another location if you can make it available. But obviously, it's not going to be that night. It's going to be some other night, maybe the next meeting night. That was pre-pandemic. Currently, we have the authority to go virtual. So assuming we continue to have the authority to go virtual, I don't see any reason why if we were to go back in person and then still have the authority to go virtual, where a call couldn't be made to revert back to virtual if it were to be necessary as an alternate venue in order to accommodate hundreds of people. Again, there's executive orders and public health emergencies and state of emergencies, one of which is no longer in existence, one of which is, that allows us to currently do it either virtually or in person, or theoretically a combination of the two, hybrid. So as long as you have the option, you have the option, and there's no reason why you can't sort of go back and forth, but you have to notice the new venue, even if you were going to revert back from in-person to virtual in that hypothetical. And poor Chris would have to go out and rechange the schedule, the annual schedule again with the newspapers, because we'd be, so to speak. But it's possible.
Matthew wanted to say something there.
Sure, I'm sorry.
I
Matthew?
mean, the only other thing I would add is just for the board to consider is the Primrose is actually an easy decision. There are so many people, you have to move it. What would be challenging is if there were 40 people, 30 people, and then who would be the person sort of now shepherding people in and out and making sure people are separated. I mean, Chris is the secretary, is already managing the meeting, but the physical logistics of managing humans in and out of doors and making sure could also be an interesting challenge that we might have to consider.
If I may ask, Chris, Mr. Chairman, have there been any zoning board meetings in the two that have taken place in person where they had 30, 40 people, or were they 5 or 6 people?
No, they've been pretty low key.
Low? Okay.
May I add something here? I've been to a couple of common council meetings because of topics on the agenda. And I would say in the order of 30, 40, we all know that room. And people distanced to some extent, but we had masks on. Absolutely. There was no exception to that. But it wasn't 6 feet by any means. Several of us sat on a bench the way we did, 2 years ago. So I think 30 to 40, that room easily, accommodates that if you accept that 6 feet is not necessary given vaccination. If you want 6 feet, you're going to be down to about 20 or 30. But so far, council meetings, as I think everyone knows, have gone forward. Obviously, Beth has been remote, and that seems to have been worked out fine. The 100 level is a different story, though.
So nobody's
by the way, if I may, it's more, if we were to be entirely in person and perhaps had a board member or two who needed, for whatever reason, to be remote, it could function. It could function because there are separate rules with respect under the MLUL already. Pre-pandemic, electronic communication was the term that allowed board members to participate telephonically, even without video, for non-hearings, meetings such as the one we're having tonight, for example. That's been provided for. For hearings, they'd have to be able to see and hear, and technically they should be seen and be heard from, unlike the old saying with children, right, or something. But seen but not heard. So it can work. It may not necessarily have to be an all or nothing entirely when we're talking about at least 1 or 2 board members.
There's no requirement for vaccination cards in the cases we're talking about in Summit, right? Either the council
Oh,
or
I'm sure.
zoning
I
board.
doubt, there's no requirement, right, Chris?
No, I think you're getting into a point where that's more of an administration decision, should that ever be decided. but-
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But on a statewide basis, from a, there's no gathering regulations anymore that are in effect, I think.
I think that's
Right?
correct from the executive orders, and I wouldn't be surprised if the answer was, we would have a problem trying to impose such a vaccination card requirement, frankly, but and same with the spacing. And I will tell you that a number of boards I'm aware of, including a number of boards I represent, have been in person for a while now, have not been spacing, and not all of them are requiring masks even while being in person and not spacing,
seems
FYI,
foolish.
for what it's worth.
Yeah, Matthew?
I would just come out and say, I'm for whatever the board decides. So I would support and do whatever the group seems okay, just as my position.
All right. I heard someone say, have the same experience I had Friday night when I went to a restaurant in Manhattan. My son and we took a little tour to the 9/11 museum and went off to have a dinner, and we were asked for our cards, which we brought with us, and our ID, so they had to match up your driver's license with your card. And I know that there's been a couple things on the news where some of the restaurant patrons got a little upset about that process. We, in the restaurant we were in, everybody seemed to comply. It really wasn't an issue at all. And then when I go to the gym every day, they ask me, well, I wish I go every day. I go 3 times a week. When I go each day I do go, they say,
You look like you go every day, Bill.
Every day,
Oh,
twice a day.
that's right, concrete and steel. They ask you all the questions. Did you travel? How do you feel? Do you have a temperature? Have you been exposed? No. You wear your mask, you go to the gym. I hate trying to work out with a mask on. It's not much fun. But I don't know how far we can go with these. I'm thinking maybe we consider January perhaps as a time that we try getting back together and give us a little more time. I'm trying to get a sense of what the board members feel like if we're not 100% comfortable. We do know, because Beth has a situation at home, she would be virtual, would be a hybrid with regard to her situation. And frankly, one board member I spoke to, to be nameless, may consider dropping off the board. So just thoughts. Maybe we clearly, with our fact that we've deferred the Beechwood out, and we need at least a month to set up the timing for it properly. It looks like, if the first we could do it might be November 22nd, when we'd have to have the applicant to have further notes, to provide further notice for an in-person meeting. That would maybe be the first period. And perhaps maybe if people would like to see the Delta variant thing kind of play out, maybe we just say, all right, we're going to be January, first meeting in January. I don't know what people feel about that. That's sort of splitting the difference in a way. Yeah, Jay.
Bill, I would like to see us get back to in person. I think the communication is more robust. I think that, whether you call it body language or any number, I'd like to see us get back. But having said that, I'm sympathetic to the argument Ellen made. I think certainly none of us want that. I don't think a hybrid meeting people can join either by Zoom or in person. I don't think that works. I think, and I know some of you may have heard David Nadeau make a very strong argument as to why that doesn't work. He was, and I certainly would not like to see us the other way. When I say that, I don't mean if 1 or 2 board members joined by virtually. That is not, in my mind, a hybrid meeting. That's an in-place meeting. Yeah. I'd like to see us get there. If it's a month or 2 out or 3 months out, that might be, as I think you were just suggesting there, Bill, as I was listening to the pros and cons. That sounds like that makes sense. I don't know that we need to rush it, so to speak.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll know a little bit more another 30 days from now or another 60 days from now. We all may feel more comfortable.
I think personally it would be better if we were back in the same room, but I know that it's kind of relaxing in some ways to walk to your computer at 7:15 and sit in your living room. There's some pros and cons of that. And I get to see this beautiful cat that Ellen has.
Oh,
Gosh, what a gorgeous cat
you know,
in the background there. Wow. No small cat.
no, she's my crazy rescue from Abu Dhabi.
Really? What a beautiful color.
Oh,
Anyway, and I get to manage my dog at times. So anyway, I think at least we're talking maybe November. I'd like to finish up my round of phone calls with some of the members I haven't spoken with, and maybe we kind of take it from there, with the earliest possible being November 22nd, but maybe pushing it to the first meeting in January, just to see how everybody reacts. Yes, Ellen?
I just want to clarify what, and maybe I can look this up online, I don't even know, what is the policy coming into the City of Summit buildings? Is there a mask mandate?
Yeah,
I'm just not sure.
Chris,
So, and I'm wondering,
Yes.
there is, okay. So, and I guess, again, my question is, at, the council meetings, are people following the rules, or are they pushing back? I'm just trying to get a feeling for it, because, I go to the city 5 days a week. I have been going to the city 5 days a week for a year. So obviously I'm comfortable doing it. I just am wondering what sort, but again, our building is, and my company is very adamant in regards to the COVID protocol. So my question is, how are they being enforced in the public buildings? And can we as the planning board sort of have our own mandates in a way?
that's a good question. Chris, what, I mean, it sounds like everyone's having to wear a mask, but they're not social distancing in council chambers. They're just wearing masks. And I
Right.
think Ellen's question is a good one. Suppose we have some wackos show up who refuse to wear masks and come storming into the council meeting or the planning board meeting. I don't think this is going to happen in Summit, but I guess it possibly could. What
You never know.
what is the way I read the new bylaws? The chair can pretty much shut the meeting down right then and there. Just, it's over, done. We're done.
Well, I
So-
think first, Chris, if I understood correctly, things have been going relatively smoothly for the governing body and the zoning board in person thus far. Is that correct?
My knowledge, yes, definitely on the zoning board. I haven't watched too many of the council meetings, but it seems to be like they're functioning as per usual.
Mhm.
Okay.
We do have the police department right next door as well. Same building.
Jay knows he banged in Bill's
Yeah.
absence, he banged the emergency alarm twice, and the police came to rescue us. And the building- That's why Jay wants to get back. He wants to call the cops on all of
There
us.
you go. There you go. Especially you, Andy.
Yeah. Thank you. Please, I need a break, like a day away from home, a night in the lockup. I'm good.
That's
Just let me know.
Are we fast approaching 11 o'clock, Mr. Chairman?
I think we
need
yeah.
a vote.
Please. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any more comments on this thing? I think it's something we'll continue to study. I don't think we have to draw a line. and say
Bill, I have
make
a
a
comment quickly.
decision.
I will do whatever everybody wants to do. I just, bearing in mind, I'm not so sure if we get another Primrose, how we're going to do that.
Right.
If we have even 43 Woodland, we had 30, 40 odd members, and I guess to Jay's point, it's happened at the council. If we have an issue where people are not socially distancing and somebody in the audience or whatever brings it up, we're far enough away from people other than ourselves. I'm fully vaccinated. Again, if everybody in the audience has a problem, if there's a disturbance, I just don't know how, if we have a Primrose in this environment, we handle that. I don't know how that, we're going to have to find an auditorium, but I'll do whatever anybody wants us to do.
Going back and forth, as you asked the question, Andy, could you do that? The answer is yes, you could, but it might not be that meeting. So here you've got notices going out to the public. Well, we're in person. No,
Not a practical thing.
and so now you're going to get, issues from the public complaining to not only us, but to the common council.
I promise to help you through it if and when that happens, but I think we could probably handle it. And I would certainly recommend that the protocols as they've been established at the municipal building, just those would be the ones to continue to adhere to, not add additional ones or certainly not take any away. And again, as long as the status quo remains the status quo vis-a-vis virtual or in person, we have the option to do either whenever, and we have the option to revert back if need be. So.
A question or an idea is
Paul.
and this probably isn't tenable from a cost perspective, but is the answer to just simply have all the meetings at this auditorium type scenario where spacing is never an issue because whether there's 15 of us or there's 150 of us, it's the large venue every time, and so nobody can complain about short notice. Though again, I'm sure there's a cost associated with that, which probably isn't great.
Yeah, I guess the Summit High School auditorium would be one or some.
Well, you have to have the recording equipment, and that would be the biggest cost.
yeah.
I mean, we could get the gym at the rec center, but then we wouldn't be able to record it and have all of that.
Okay.
I don't think we're gonna have
Yeah,
that
yeah.
problem. Like, I think
No.
we can cross those bridges if and when we get there, that
Right.
we likely won't get there. I shouldn't jinx us, but
I think that opens up misunderstandings about location of the meeting. As much as we publicize it, there are people who are going to go up to City Hall. It's been at City Hall for the last 30 years. I don't think if there's a situation that demands it, I think we address it then. I think that's a change that just will be, too many people will miss that change.
right. And if and when that happens, don't forget the applicant's a part and parcel of it, a significant part and parcel of it. And the applicant may have to address, how to, in part, how it can function and the costs associated therewith, because land use law in New Jersey is a user fee system, essentially. If an applicant, homeowner, developer from in town, from out of town wants to do something, the taxpayers don't, bear the brunt of it, in essence. They pay application fees and escrow fees and special meeting fees if there are special meetings. So
Yeah.
That's a case by case basis if and when those cases happen, even pre-pandemic.
Okay, I think we've had a good discussion, on this topic. Let's keep it alive for a little while, month to month, and see how it goes. I think at this point, unless anybody has anything further to discuss, I could entertain a motion to adjourn.
Before you do, I just want to clarify, it says on the bottom of the agenda, next regularly scheduled meeting of the planning board, Monday, October 25, 2021. I take it it's going to be on that night and it's going to be virtual, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for bringing it up.
That'll get us to our next meeting.
All right. So now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Second. Thank you, Ellen. All right, everybody. Well, thank you all very much. It's been kind of an interesting meeting, and we'll see everybody in a month.
Take care.
All right, take care, everybody.